So let's look at the agenda here. We've got a lot of things, a lot of really cool things to talk about today. First is real-time layering, which is a totally new way of the OS drawing things, and it manages a lot of stuff for you. We got a few cool features of a new widget, ImageScroller, relatively new, and a string field, some new cool stuff that it can do. We're also going to look at a new type of font that looks nice and smooth in comparison to our current fonts, which are kind of blocky. And then the big one for a lot of people is a multi-language support. A lot of anybody who does products for multiple languages really has been asking for this, and it's going to help them a lot. All right, let's dig into real-time layering. There's really the old method. You had to manually redraw everything. The problem is that the Amulet OS always drew to the top layer. So if you wanted to layer something underneath something else and have that thing on the bottom layer change, you had to then redraw everything on top of that in the correct order. So it ends up being a lot of code and a pain in the butt. The new method, the OS redraws everything for you. You don't have to do any of that code. So let's take a look at an example. Here I have the player running on a simple project that's just two buttons, custom button and a function button, layered on top of each other. And in the old way, if I were to hit the bottom button, it would paint to the top layer. And this corner of the function button is now just, it's not visible anymore. I could hit it again, but now because of the way we drew things, that function button on the top remembered the green from before. So it doesn't look good. On our new one, our new OS, I can hit that button in the back all I want, and the OS automatically redraws everything for you. There's zero extra code here other than the two buttons.
No names are available.
Sorry about that. We got a phone next to our Skype here. So we've got a function button. There's zero code. You can see this href here. There's zero code running to make this all happen. It's all done for you. So if anybody's familiar with doing layering in the past, this is a pretty huge upgrade. All right, let's get rid of this. All right, the ImageScroller. This widget is kind of like your iPhone style vertical or horizontal scrolling selection object, like a list selector. And the new features, it can automatically take several smaller images and stitch them together into one large image. And because now we're doing that on the fly, we can rearrange those images and we can change from vertical to horizontal. And that very quickly lets us do lots of iterations and no code and no work that you have to do on your side to make things work. So and then the transparency support, which that particular widget didn't have before. It makes it let us do some cool stuff with it. So let's start a new project. Let's go in and add an image scroller. And the first thing, if you're familiar with this widget, the sequence property replaced the scroller image property. So the sequence parameter replaced the scroller. The scroller image was one long image. You had to do it all yourself, and you had to concatenate the images yourself. This lets you take a bunch of images, and let's go to this webinar folder. And I have a bunch of images here that are it's from a concept of an oven we did. And these are all different modes of the oven. So like convection and convection bake and whatnot, and broil. So let's add these. Let's just add them all and save that. And now I've got a vertical scroller with all those images in it. And I can run it. Oh yeah, it's going to throw me a warning because number of selections can't be 0. All right. Let's set that and then run it. And now we've got cool widget that I click and drag, and you probably can't see it on the how smooth it is on the blockiness of the web connection, but you can basically flick this and it'll have inertia and do all kinds of fun things. Let's go ahead and add a property to this. Something you couldn't do before was change the orientation on the fly. So now I've got a vertical. I just want to make it a horizontal one. I just change the property, and bam, now it's a horizontal scroller. Here's my new scroller. I can rearrange these images on the fly. I can move the purple one to the right of the red one. That's settings 2, I believe. Bam. So this is all things you really couldn't do before. It was hard to do. You probably had to get either someone who knew Photoshop or another graphics program to actually do it for you, because it was kind of a pain in the butt. Now it's all done for you, very easy. Hopefully a lot of people will be able to utilize this new feature. All right. If you guys have any questions, Sam and Johnny are manning the IM, or if you're on the phone, just speak up a bit. Let me turn my volume back up. We'll try to get your questions answered right away. You don't have to wait to the end. Let's see, string field. All right. So string field, a lot of people may be familiar with it. It's just something that draws a string. Some cool new features of it. We have this scrollable canvas, so you can actually draw your text to this off-screen buffer and scroll that buffer, scroll that canvas anywhere on the screen, and your widget becomes a window to in that buffer. What that lets you do is slide strings around the screen, and we'll show you a demo of that. We also have a new API to get the width and height of the displayed text, which lets you do cool things because you know the width and height, you know how far to scroll it. And then another cool thing you couldn't do before was have transparent fonts. So let's look at a demo of that. Okay, so we've got just one string field that's looking at, it's not looking at anything, it's being set. Let's just run it. We're setting a string of the string field, and because I know how long it is, I can know exactly when to bounce back and forth. The string's going right, and then it bounces back to the left, and it knows exactly when to do that because it knows the length of the string. Okay. And I can change the string, and now this is the second string, and it's a little bit longer, as it says, and it knows exactly when it gets to the end of the string, and it can bounce back a third string that's even longer. So you can do scrolling marquees and cool things like that. You can also change the transparency of that string, which was something you couldn't do before. All right, string field. With more string support comes a new font converter. And this font converter, really the reason we needed to change it was to enable the multi-language support. You're able to choose specific regions of a font file for specific languages, rather than just having to grab, the old way you had to grab everything from your lower ASCII, your English, all the way up to Chinese. If you wanted just Chinese and English, then you had to get everything in between. So now the files can be a lot smaller. You can grab just the portions of the font that you want. So it makes it smaller and faster. This also is version control friendly, which means you can save the fonts in your project folder, which you couldn't do before. Now you can save them in a font subfolder or right in the root folder of your GEMStudio project, and give that to someone else and they'll have your fonts as well. Before it was kind of a pain to go to some global folder that wasn't part of your project and not in your source control just to put the font in, and now it's a lot friendlier. With this, we also have a new font file format that has some anti-aliasing, and that allows us to do the smoothing. So let's look at that anti-aliasing. This is a quick little blow up of what the anti-aliasing looks like. So on the top left is our new anti-aliased font, and you blow it up and you can see it kind of actually looks blurry. And that's exactly what anti-aliasing is. So we get aliasing because if we were to draw with a pencil or a pen on a piece of paper, we get a nice smooth line. But when we try to take that smooth line and turn it into a digital thing, a digital image, the pixels are either on or off. So that's what we have on the bottom here, is this pixels are on or off aliasing, and it's called a bitmap font. But we apply a smoothing algorithm to it, and you get these nice, it kind of looks blurry when it's blown up, but when it's original size, it actually makes it look smoother. You can see that a lot in the, can't see it much in the H, that's kind of straight, but in the E and the O and the W, anything on an angle or rounded is going to look a lot better with these new fonts. So let's take a look at it. First thing we want to do to see this in action is go to the Unicode code charts, and this actually contains all of the sections, all of the different languages are defined by Unicode, and where they are in the fonts and what characters are supported are defined by the Unicode consortium. You know, even emojis and things are controlled by them. So you can just, if you want to add a specific language to your project, the first step is finding where does that language exist in the font file. So let's look at CEJK, which is Chinese, Japanese, Korean unified. So these are a lot of glyphs. I'll just click one of these. These are a lot of glyphs shared between Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. The only part I'm really interested in is this right here, the Unicode range. And this is in hexadecimal, so there's hex 3400 to 4db5. Let's go to the new font converter. Let's launch GEMStudio, and now it's right in the file menu, launch font converter. And we're gonna pick a font that I know has this, not all fonts have all languages in them. If you actually, let me close this for a second. Oh yeah, let's go here. If we look at all the, if you go to your Windows font directory, maybe you scroll over to right and sort by size, you'll see ones that are like 6 kilobyte, 8 kilobyte, 10, 12, whatever, they only have Latin characters in them. But you sort the other way, we've got 30 megabyte, 25 megabyte files. These are designed for Korean, Japanese, Han, Chinese. So those are the fonts we actually want to pick here if we want to support Chinese, for example. The one I know I want is called Microsoft, and let's Yahe. And we're just going to pick a regular 16, something like that. Now the font's loading. We get a preview of the font, same as before, similar to what was before. But now, right in this glyph range, I can add more. And let's go look at that Korean, Japanese unified ideographs and add our new range, 3400 to 4db5. All right, so now if I scroll down, oh, there's a lot more. All these guys, now they're all going to be in our font. And all I have to do is save that font. All right, so this is the global font folder, which it defaults to, which is not a bad place to store your fonts. But if you wanted to share it with anyone, you might want to do it in a local folder. So let's go, where's my folder today? I'm in Documents, Video, or in a Webinar. All right, so, oh, I've already got it. Let's just overwrite that one. So, we've got this new font, and it contains many thousands of characters now. One other thing before I get out of this is I want to show you, we've got this new anti-aliased box over here, and when I click it, it actually changes how these are drawn, and you might be able to see they're a little smoother. Let me choose a much bigger font. You'll be able to see, let's go to like a 72. You'll be able to really see the rounding. So bitmap on this exclamation point, it's kind of jagged, and the dot. Now if I choose anti-aliased, now it appears a lot smoother. Go to all these characters, and they will appear a lot smoother in the anti-aliased version. All right, these are kind of blocky, bad examples. There's a good one. All those things on angles are kind of little ledges hanging off of things. They're little anti-aliased, they're aliasing artifacts. When I go to anti-aliased mode, it looks nice and smooth. So now we've saved our font. Let's close this down. And now, if I wanted to use that font, I can click on fonts here. And what was that, Microsoft Yahoo? And it says local, you see. The local in parentheses means that it's local to the project. So if I go to open another project in another directory, it wouldn't even be in this list. There's also, let's find another one. Let's see, here we go. Bitstream Bear Sans, if it says in parentheses anti-aliased, that means it's compiled with that new anti-alias setting. It's a smooth font. Now, when do you want to choose an anti-alias? Usually, it's very small fonts, even 8-point or smaller. Very small fonts actually kind of look better when they're not anti-aliased, when they're blocky. Things become clearer. But if you're going to go above 10-point and above, you're probably going to want to use an anti-aliased. It just looks better. All right. So let's go back. This leads us to our multiple language support, our big multi-language feature. This allows you to design your GUI. It could be in English, it could be in another language, but the base language you design your GUI in doesn't matter. You can still deploy to any other language and change that language at runtime. So you could have a bunch of buttons of flags or a language changing page in your project and click that button and save that so that every time it boots after that, it'll remember the language setting, and you don't really need to manage any of the translations yourself. It's all really done for you. One of the best parts of this is that your translators don't need GEMStudio. GEMStudio creates files for the translators, and they're the file types that most professional translators know how to use already. And there's free programs for them and for you to be able to, take suggestions from Google Translate or from, professional databases of translations that help them make the translations. But if you don't do the translations yourself, you don't need to even worry about those tools or any of those steps. This is all done with a standard called gettext. So let's look at gettext a little bit. Gettext is a standard. It's a GNU standard, and it defines several things. The code and file conventions are how do you tell that a string is supposed to be translated. Maybe you don't want to translate all of your strings. Most strings you're probably going to want to translate. If you display the string in your GUI, the label on a button, for example, automatically going to get translated or be marked for translation. The file conventions are define where you store your translation files so that they're automatically found by the compiler. And we make it all very, very easy for you. The message catalogs are what actually GEMStudio will generate that contain all of your translations. These translations are then passed to the translator, and the translator really uses their own tools on it, or even just Notepad or a text editor, and they're pretty easy to parse and put in the required translation for whatever language they're translating for. And the final piece of this is the runtime translation. The translator gives you back a file. You really don't need to do much with it other than compile it with a free tool. or they'll give you a compiled version even if you ask. And the runtime translation does everything else for you. Nothing else is needed. So just a quick flow chart of what that looks like. We've got, you're going to create your GUI. That's your job. That's always going to be your job. But then you export those strings and send it to a translator. The translator's job, they make sure all the strings are translated. Once you get that file back, it's a real quick import into GEMStudio. Now, if you've modified your GUI in between, you can send them new strings, but just the new ones. They don't have to retranslate all of the old strings. And if you changed any strings and got rid of any, all the tools will manage that for you. Everything, they just need to translate the new strings. And so then you can do a lot of iterations without having to do a lot of extra rework. And then as soon as you're done modifying your GUI, get out of this loop and you're done. Let's look at this in action. Let's see, go back to GEMStudio. Let's open up project here. So I've got one button. It says Spanish on it. I think it might be kind of obvious what I want to do here. I'm going to translate that into Spanish. So first thing I do is go into the Tools menu and select Generate Pot File. The pot, there's a lot of acronyms might throw out here. Pot is Portable Object Template. Basically, it's the template file that contains all of the untranslated strings in your project. So I'm going to generate that. It automatically goes into my project folder. I'm in the webinar November 2016 folder, and it created a languages folder for me. And it already saves it with the right name. So all I have to do is hit save. That's it. Let's take a look at this file. So if I go to my webinar folder and open up the languages folder, this file, let's open it with Notepad, and it just says the label parameter for this widget on this page, and then here's the untranslated string, and it's the translator's job to fill in this translation here. And you can see back in GEMStudio, it's the label parameter for the function button called myFunctionButton1 on page 1. So everything is spelled out. It's similar to the line of code that your string is on. And in fact, if you had script code in there, it would even put the line of code in the script that the string was on. So let's take a look. The next step is translating. We could throw in a translation right here, but you know, if we have a bunch, it might not be great to look at it inside of text editor. It's a little easier to manage in a tool. So here is a tool called PO-Edit. So this is if you remember, it's called a POT file. That's the extension on the file we just made. So a PO is whack off the T, and it's no longer a template. It's a portable object file that is specific to one language. So I can open up this pot file, and it's going to ask me, what language do you want to translate to? And I can choose, there's all kinds of, there's the base language, and then there's a regional dialect of that language. So you can have a different type of Spanish for every different region that's defined. So let's choose, I'm just going to leave it on Spanish for the Mexican region. And it automatically creates the right file name. And this is, you can see ES for Spanish, underbar MX for Mexico. All of these naming conventions are part of the standard. So we don't define them, but we conform them, and it makes it very easy for you to do whatever you need. So here I can just take in the source text, it says Spanish, and add the translation. I'm going to be dumb and not know what the translation is, mostly because I don't know how to make that little tilde over the N. And just go to Google Translate. All right, and I'm going to just, I wouldn't recommend doing Google Translate for your whole GUI, but it's going to be okay for a lot of one-word things, but Some things might mean different things in different languages. The context might not be right. So that's why you might want a professional translator, or at least someone who is bilingual. Let's get this one translation. Now all I need to do is save it, and it's going to default to that same languages subfolder of my project, and I'm going to save it with a PO extension. It also automatically compiles it. So if I go back to that folder, I've got a .mo and a .po. The .mo is the machine object file that GEMStudio actually uses. It's the compiled version of the PO, and it's a bunch of machine code and then strings that aren't. It's basically just not in a text editor friendly format, but it's a lot more compact for us. Now we've got this pretty much ready to go, except I haven't told it to change languages. So let's use that button. So the command to change languages, we can hit tab and go down to amulet:language, and then all of our language options are here. I can save it to Flash. So if I want to save this, so every time after I change this, it boots up the module, boots up with the same language setting. You don't have to choose the language every time you boot up. So it's kind of handy. But right now I just want to set the language. And I hit tab again, and it parses the directories and finds all of the available languages. So none is going to be the default language you designed it in. Could be usually English. But now I'm going to change it to Spanish. And then I'm going to fill it out with a .mo. That's the name of the file it uses. And we're done. Let's run it. Run. Okay, so I hit run. It says Spanish. Wait for it to pop up. And I just click the button. Automatically translated. Now, the function, the set language function, automatically went to every single widget in my page and told it to redraw with the new language. It's automatically done for you. So if I, for example, wanted to make another button, and this one, let's go back to English. Just label to English, and then set language back to none. So first step, I need to regenerate that pot file. So I'm just going to overwrite my old one. Yes, replace it. And then go into, let's go back to PO edit. Here it is. And then we want to update it from the pot file. I don't want to create a new one because I've already translated Spanish. So let's just update it from the pot file and choose our pot file. And now the Spanish translation stays, and I can go back to English, and what is English in Spanish? Inglés. All right. Go back to PO edit. Just paste in my translation and save it again. Right. Going back to GEMStudio. Back in GEMStudio now. I've got my two buttons, two languages. All my files are in their proper directories. It's all done for me. I hit run, and I can go to Spanish and go back to English. All right. There's a little more to it. For example, having strings that you don't want to translate. And I'm not going to go through all the details about it now, but there's a walkthrough in the help. So if you go to the user's guide and then go down to, as it loads, the GEMStudio IDE features localization, there's a step-by-step guide on how to do all of this. And it's going to take you through the example in the Amulet help this example is included with it, and we take you through how to translate. This is, I think it's Afrikaans language. Another Google Translate could be completely bogus, but hopefully no one's offended. So we've got, ways to not translate specific strings. You see the bottom one, hello world, even in the translation is not translated. So you can mark strings for not being translated as well. But that's probably a whole nother webinar. That's it.